Dash React is quite possibly the most powerful module that Dash has ever released. It provides amazing new features to your systems. It makes processes that were once very difficult to accomplish simple. And it gives us new features to do new things that we haven't even thought of yet. So I'm very excited to provide this tool set to you guys, and I'm very excited to see what comes out of it. This is the getting started video tutorial. We're going to be going over the very fundamentals of Dash React, and we're going to show the most basic example of Dash React functioning. I hope this turns into many videos where we can build up a file and we can give you examples to play with and to see working in your own environment, something that you can experiment with and change and adapt. And to do that, we're going to program in a very specific way, one that I think is probably the best way you can learn any module out there or learn how to do any kind of functionality. So I hope you can adopt this into your own learning experience as well as you build your own files or learn new modules. If you have any questions, if something in this video was not clear to you, you can go to the Dash OS community forums and post it there, and we will definitely be able to answer your question promptly. There's also the HIP chat community chat room that you can join and ask for a little bit quicker response, but the forums are probably the best place for React questions especially. So let's start by going over what React is and why it's so powerful and why it's so important. React essentially replaces the URC variable system, which is a very powerful and great system to use, but this adds a whole new dimension of options to how you manipulate and work with variables. But most importantly, what it allows you to do is it allows you to create what we call listeners on a variable's value and automatically trigger a macro to occur in the background. So it's not going to hold up your user if it triggers, okay? So it happens in the background once the parameters that you specify are met. So you can say, if my variable becomes this, okay, trigger this macro. But then we can kind of extend that from there and get more and more powerful, because we can do logic on the value and right from our device event without having to program all these if-else statements. So we can quickly program crazy possibilities, like if it includes watch, do this. If it includes DirecTV, do this. Okay, so once my variable becomes watch DirecTV, I have two macros that occur simultaneously. One is turning on my TV and setting inputs, the other is turning on my DirecTV, so my system gets exponentially faster. We can do so much more than that as well. So definitely take a look at the product page if you want to see kind of some of the more advanced functionality that's possible. But the goal of this video isn't to accomplish anything specific. It's to give you a firm understanding of how Dash React works and to give you a tool set that will allow you to experiment with it so you can learn how you can integrate it into your current systems as well as your future systems. Okay? A lot of people have begun integrating Dash React as the core part of their system, and what I mean by that is pretty much everything is going through Dash React. However, that is not necessary. The beauty of how this module works is it can start simple, and you can use it for the simplest of tasks, and you can grow with it. As you learn to use other parts of Dash React, you can start integrating that further and further until you become an expert. So I wanted to start from scratch here, and you can find this file on the Getting Started guide in the Dash OS forums if that's not where you came from. And we're just going to go ahead and start programming our system. Okay, and I'm doing this isn't scripted, or I don't have a plan in mind, so I'm sure I'll make some mistakes along the way, so you'll have to forgive me for those. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with a simple kind of mock-up of a system. I'm going to use my MRX10. Weather is not really that important since it's not really a real system, but I'm going to do it anyways. Okay, and of course going to hide the equipment closet. I'm going to add my Dash OS room. As most of you should know, that's one of the important steps to setting up System Monitor and Dash on your system. I'm going to hide that, and then I'm going to add my first room, which we're going to use with our interfaces. For URC devices, since this is just an example, I'm going to add the 1080 as well as iPhone and iPad mobile. I'll of course have to set up my licenses, which I will do at a later time. Then we're going to add our other devices. Go to My, and if you haven't imported already, make sure you do import, restart, etc. according to the instructions. But we need to add, of course, Dash System Monitor, as well as React. Now, an important note to go over, I mean, if you're viewing this video, chances are you're well aware, but always check and make sure that this checkbox exists. Every time I open a file, every time I'm working with something and it's been a while, or it's not like I'm, this is my 5th download of the day, I tend to go through on the left and click on each module and confirm that this checkbox in the very far right does exist, because if it doesn't, the module was somehow taken out of my system. Okay, and this is the most common request for support. People come in and say, hey, my module's not working, and sure enough, somehow it got overwritten or something like that, and it was no longer imported. If you don't see the checkbox, re-import your module and restart Accelerator, and it should show up. But very important step to take. Now, I'm just have OCD, so you'll see me do some stuff just to make sure it looks all tidy and pretty. Okay? And I'm also going to add my special driver here, which is just basically an empty device. And I'm going to add this to the room so that I can jump into it later. I'm just going to call it my device. And you'll see why I'm doing that in a little bit. Okay. Network setup. Both of these just require a unique IP address. Okay. Obviously, I'll go back and discover later, but I want the file to be easy for you guys to modify to your own systems. We'll go ahead and accelerate here. I'm going to hide both of these actually. And we'll come back to this step once we know what we're going to do with it. For third-party two-way settings, if you have downloaded this file or you're filing along, make sure that you go through and set your Dash username. Password's not important. And React actually has no parameters to worry about, so we can move on. So, all right, we are at the part that we are ready to start programming with React. So, with React, it works a little bit backwards from what you might be used to. Device events, we're used to having them be what kind of happen later in the system. So we program them saying, okay, if the system ever does this, then trigger this macro. We're still doing that with React, but it's also what's creating our variables. So until we have a listener for a variable, which we'll go over in a moment, we can't set that variable. And this happens at startup, but if we try to set a variable which we have no listeners for, it doesn't exist, so it's not going to do anything. And Cloud Logs is going to spit out an error saying this variable doesn't exist, which we will show in a future troubleshooting video. So essentially, what we're doing here is we are considering how we want our macros to sit or be triggered based on what each variable we create becomes or was. And we'll get deeper and deeper into the many features and various parts of logic that you can use. For now, we're just going to start with the most simple, which is a simple variable event. Okay? And we're going to go ahead and program this. variable name. So this is actually, this step right here is actually going to create our variable. It's important to know that the variable is case sensitive. So my first variable is actually a completely different variable than my first variable, all lowercase. Okay, and that will become important as you get deeper into programming more advanced systems, and we'll go over that. But at this time, I'm just going to use my first variable with each first letter capitalized. Okay. Then we have becomes value and was value, and you'll notice they both are optional. If you were to just leave this empty, it's actually never going to trigger anything, but it's not going to give you an error. But becomes value or was value means that we can trigger, for example, when it becomes value, event 1. So if I ever set my first variable to event 1, this macro would trigger if this is the event that I create. Okay. I could also move that down to here, and now this will trigger once it is no longer event 1 after it becomes. So if I set my variable to event 1 and then I make it event 2, this macro will occur at this time. Okay? And then I could, of course, do something like this, which means that if my variable was event 2 and becomes event 1, this macro will occur. So this is the most basic event that React supports. It should be fairly simple to work with and understand. Okay? It's not getting into all the extra logic and everything. But the essential idea here and what we want to program is simply that a macro should occur if I ever set my first variable to event 1. So for name, I always start my device events with the first letter of the module that is triggering the event. That way I can kind of see quickly in the listing what does what. And then I try to make the name as descriptive as possible about when this specific device event is going to occur. Oh, annoying. All right. So in this case, the React event is going to trigger when my first variable is equal to event 1. And simple enough, we'll press OK, and we have our device event here, which is programmed to trigger if my first variable becomes event 1. Now we're not trying to accomplish anything specific here, so I'm just going to go ahead, and this is kind of the way we're going to do it throughout as we build this up, and this is the best way you can learn how to do advanced programming, is to not try to do this complex thing and worry about the devices themselves. Okay, so don't try to program a door lock, for example, your first time ever trying to do this, and program it to do all these crazy different functions, because there are 100 places that you could go wrong. It's important to first understand what's happening and why. And that can be done very, very easily by utilizing cloud logging. And this video is also going to show you how to do that. But the idea here is, instead of doing anything, I'm just going to simply output to cloud logs whenever this macro occurs, so that I can see exactly when that macro occurred and what it was thinking and doing. So we're going to just go ahead and name it output to cloud logs, and the message is going to be, yay, my first variable has become event 1 and our device event macro was triggered. And for category, I'll just call it -react. Actually, I'll call it event macro, so we know that it was within device events that this output came from. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK, and my new command is here, and that command can only happen if this gets triggered. So when we're viewing our cloud logs, you'll know. At the moment, it will never trigger because we never set my first variable to event 1. It's just going to stay at its default value, which is nothing, forever. So now we need to create a button in our system that will set my first variable to event 1. So let's go to Edit User Interfaces. Okay, and this must be on page. Okay. So we have this page here. I'm going to drag actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create a new submenu so that we can stay with the same organization as we build it up. Okay, little URC bug here. Okay, and we're going to just call this my first variable. Okay, so we know that anything in this folder is affecting that variable. And I'm going to drag a macro here, and I'm going to say set to event 1. So this macro we're going to have set our my first variable to the value event 1. Okay. Now I'm going to just turn off syncing for my device here, which we'll go over why in the near future. So let's go back to our macro. Here's our custom macro that we just added. Now we set a variable and manipulate variables, and pretty much all of the programming for React is done via TCL command. So we're going to open up the TCL command window here, select React, and I'm not going to show you the many commands that are available, and many more are planned. We're just going to keep it simple and use the default command, which is set variable, which allows us to set a variable to a value. Okay, it's going to change whatever it was to whatever we type here. Okay, there's other ways to, of course, add or delete from or that type of thing, but that will be in a future video. So for this, our two-way command, we'll just call it set my first variable to event 1, descriptive enough for me, and variable, my first variable, we're going to set to the value of event 1. Okay, so this command will set our variable, which should then, of course, trigger my device event here, because it says that if it becomes event 1, it should trigger, as long as the module works as advertised, right? So we're going to see this effect, okay, but I'm going to take it one step further to give you a little bit more understanding of where this can be powerful. Because of course we can get much more advanced with things, and that's where we really start to open up new features and ideas. But even at this most basic level, this can provide a fairly powerful feature to your system. And that feature is background macros, okay? And simultaneous execution of multiple macros at once. So I want to outline that so that when we bring up the interface and we show you cloud logging, you can kind of understand what it's doing. But obviously when we press this macro now, since that macro that we've created in our device events is going to trigger, and we're viewing cloud logs, we'll see it output our message to the cloud logging. But what's really powerful here is that this is going to occur, and it's going to start triggering that macro. But at the same time, this macro is going to continue on. Okay? So we have two macros now that will be occurring at the exact same time. Say that we have a projector turning on and switching inputs, and that takes 15 seconds. Our end user doesn't have to sit and wait and see a please wait screen and feel that their system is so slow, because they're going to instantly be able to continue seeing the system start up. They're going to see it jump to the interface. They might not see the screen yet, okay, unless you decide to add a long enough delay for that. But things are going to happen simultaneous, so our system is actually going to speed up exponentially. So I'm going to outline and show you that. I'm going to add a please wait manually here. Oops, wrong button. Okay, so I'm just going to add a please wait to the command. With URC's please wait, if you're not aware, it basically will bring up like the please wait animation for the length of the macro, so we can kind of see how fast this is occurring. And then I'm going to, at the end of the macro, I'm going to jump into my device. So we haven't done anything special yet, because even if this was just directly the output to cloud logs, it would still just jump right to my device. We wouldn't see any delay because it's only one command. However, if we were to change this macro, and maybe we add a 10-second delay here, and then we do another output to cloud logs, and it says 10 seconds has now passed since the event 1 device event was triggered. Simple enough. You know what, I'm going to change both of these to event 1 macro, just for sake of future extensibility. So now my device event macro in the background is going to send a message, wait 10 seconds, and then send another message, so that we can kind of see that happening in cloud logs. Meanwhile, we should see basically jump into the device immediately, even though that command is still happening, and be able to use the My Device, which is just going to be an empty user interface. Okay, so that's the very, very basic fundamentals of Dash React, and we will extend this in further videos. And once I have the chance to download this to my system, I will continue this video and show you as we run cloud logging and do that whole thing. So stay tuned. All right, so we've gone and downloaded to our system. It's loading now. So we're going to start our cloud logging as our system is booting up. And that's an important step, because as our system is booting up and as the modules are starting up, a lot of what they do is in the startup. When they first are loading is when they're going to really try to process the data that you've provided and program that in a way that it can be used. So if there's an error or some sort of bug, chances are you're going to see it in startup, not afterwards. So what a lot of us have started to do is always run cloud logs when our system is booting up. So once the system is, well, there it is now. So there's, as the system boots up, we can see System Monitor has started to report its information. Next, we should see React show up if everything's working right. And React is going to start to show its information. In this case, showing the trial period is still going. I haven't installed a license. And it's also going to report and tell us that a new rule was created, that the variable was created, how many more hours we have in our trial period. So all of the information that we're going to need to troubleshoot should there be an issue is pretty much going to be provided to us here. Now, if you don't know how to read these cloud logs, but you know you have an issue, run the cloud logs on startup like we just did, and you can go ahead and print it as a PDF or save it as a PDF and post it to the forums or the HIP chat so that we can take a look and say, okay, here's where you probably went wrong. Maybe you didn't capitalize something properly, whatever it might be. We'll be able to see the issue very quickly. So React has started at this point, and we know it's created my variable. Here it says, it's created a new rule for my first variable, which is our variable name. And the rule is when it becomes, or when it's to event 1, and then the action, which you can, well, for the most part, just ignore. So at the end of the day, that's exactly what we wanted and what we programmed. So we're going to go over to our UI here, and we have my first variable, and that's our submenu. So we're going to open up our submenu, and here we should see set to event 1, as you can see. And when I press set to event 1, we should see everything report to cloud logging. So a benefit of React is that every time you change a variable, it's going to report that change. It's going to report what it changed from and what it changed to. And it's also going to start to give you information on what it believes is the proper events and why that might trigger your various macros. So all of the information you could need if the system is not doing what you want it to is going to be given to you right here. So I'm going to open this again, set to event 1. You can see it's how fast this is, and the macro is still running. If you remember, it's a 10-second macro, but I can control the user interface. The end user has no perception that that 10 seconds is passing before another command goes. So it becomes a significantly faster experience to your end user. It's much more responsive, and it's still achieving exactly what you'd want them to achieve. So again, if I go ahead and click Set to Event 1, you see how fast it is. You see in cloud logs instantly what's going on, and then 10 seconds later, even as my user might be controlling the user interface, the end user may perceive the system is already ready. Then we see our 10 seconds has passed. So of course this is the most basic level, but it shows you the power of what React can do, how fast it can provide control and options to your system. And this is just, one macro. You can imagine 10 all at the same time, all with this functionality, basically enhancing everything you can do with your system. And even that is just the start of it. So as you grow with React, you're going to learn many new features and many new ways to build your systems and to provide powerful user experiences. And user experience is what Dash React is all about. So I hope you stick with us through the various chapters. This being chapter 1, you can expect we will start to expand upon this very simple fundamental example and start to move into much more enhanced, complex, awesome examples, and get more specific into various things like how can we do variable syncing and how can we append and delete and all this other stuff that we will go over as we get to it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a lot and you're excited about the possibilities. Definitely come to the forums or the HIP chat if you have any other questions that you want addressed, and we will take care of it. Thanks a lot for your time today, guys, and we'll see you soon.